This is a French plane, or it's a French slash German. It's one of those weird ones. Definitely has been given a bit of a buff over the last year or so, or half a year. It was given an S-spawn, and I think it needed it. It does have 620mm in the nose, so it has good firepower. The issue is its maneuverability and its speed, not so good at 5.7. So what you're left with is a worse DO335. And that is not the situation you want to be left in as something that was a premium aircraft. A lot of people complained when this was one of the aircraft that you could get in order to get into the French, closed beta for their aircraft. This, to me, was the perfect plane because it didn't sell power. It wasn't as good as the G55S was. Because something you got to remember is the G55S, for a solid maybe month after it was out, was still dominating matches because the experienced players were using it to just grind through the tech tree. The SO8000, not so much. It was kind of dead after about a week or so because people realized it really wasn't that good. So yeah, it's still not great, but it does get an S-spawn. It did get a flight model change recently, and also secondary ordnance-wise, it does get quite a lot of them. So you have two 1000s, 8 T10s, or 8 T10 151s, so basically AP and HE rockets. One set's AP and one set's HE. So with that said, it does have a lot of use in ground forces, which is nice. It does have a dual role of, ground attack and pseudo fighter. So overall, it's alright to pick up. But if you're picking it up to grind, you're gonna have a bad day. It's much better just to pick up maybe the Act 3, and then once you get to the jets, just play the jets, the Votor, and just grind from there. Turn your brain off and play the Votor. The next one is the M4A1 FL10. This was another vehicle that you could buy in order to get access to the French. It was extremely good when it first came out, and it still is extremely good. Imagine putting a 75mm long barrel with an autoloader or on an M4 chassis with an incredibly stable turret. That was basically what the M4 was when it came out. And its turret is definitely less stable now, but it's still an incredibly good gun. And what this meant was penning this thing was not exactly the easiest, especially since a lot of people weren't used to the oscillating turrets back then. And also the hull had a tendency of just bouncing random stuff when it should never. So as you can see, it has the autoloader in the back there, has rounds of 6 and then 12 in the ready racks, I suppose. And with that, what you have is a very, very strong auto-loading gun with a 5-second reload. It also has access to the APC. Remember, before the French were released, they did that big rework to AP, so it was actually useful. And this benefited a lot of nations, and of course it benefited the French a lot. So 4.7, 168mm of pen, that's enough to easily pen a Tiger on its, its flat plate. So it's good at pretty much killing everything. The only problem you're going to run into if you use this thing is if you get caught out when you're on the move, and you're not able to stabilize the gun quick enough. Pretty much the same issue that all oscillating turrets have. But overall, it's a good machine. It's fun to use, fast firing gun, good penetration, decent speed. It's a recipe for some fun times. The next machine is the KPZ M47G. This is an exact copy of the M47 that we have in the American tree. And it's a rank 5, so it'll be good for grinding every rank in the German tree right now. It's got probably the best skin in game when it comes to premiums. I really love this skin, and it holds a special place in my heart because, well, in the Battle of the Bulge, they used Patton 2s as the Tiger 2s. So it was one of those fun little things, and that's why I really like this vehicle. Overall, I'm generally against, vehicles fighting themselves, and it's still the same case with the M47, which is why I'll never buy it. But with the 90mm that it has, it has access to pretty much every round under the sun. But the Heat FS is the one that everybody uses because it does the most penetration. Now, a lot of the M47 and M46 and the M48 and the M60 all have really bad stigmas around them when it comes to the American tree, and the reason is because they have awful stock grinds. But once you actually get them fully upgraded, they're pretty nippy. They're not, the fastest, but they're good enough. They have good guns. The reload is, very standard compared to a lot of other things. They have a lot of utility in the form of smoke, in the form of machine guns. They're good machines. The issue is that initial stock grind is abhorrent on the American mediums. Well, guess what you don't have to do when you have a premium version of one of those premiums? You don't have to grind it out because you get all the modules for free. So overall, it works well. At 7.3 though, unfortunately you don't have anything to run with it, so you're going to have to, run it as a max BR vehicle and run everything else at 7.0. So, the Jagdpanzer 4.5, the Cougar Blitz, Tiger 2, Panther 2, there's a lot of options if you want to take. If you want to up-tier it, because of the Heat FS, it can easily go at 7.7, alongside the Leopard 1 and the Mouse, so it's a pretty good deal. But apart from that, I wouldn't up-tier it that much, I wouldn't go to 8.0 with it. Overall, it's a really good vehicle. Let's move on. The Dora Pack. Ah, yes. The blight of my dreams. The Focke-Wulf 190D13 was an absolute monster back in the day, and then every other nation actually got comparable aircraft eventually, instead of having to use Spitfire F Mark 9s against Focke-Wulf 190D13s. Back in the day, I used to use the Tempest Mark 5 to absolutely annihilate D13s, and I still do it to this day. The only difference is that a lot of the Doras actually went down in BR because people complained a lot. Not because their win rates went down, basically because they were seen as not combat effective, people using the BF-109s more, and that was because they kept reducing their BR. So of course people are going to play it. The D13 in general is a good high-altitude, mid-altitude energy fighter. The problem is a lot of people don't like energy fighting, they prefer turn fighting, so people are going to go towards the BF-109K, which is much more of a jack of all trades, but if you want to learn how to energy fight properly, you use something like a D9, D12, or D13. If you want to actually, use this as a grinder though, there are much better options out there. The DO335, you can turn your brain off and use it. The JU288C, which you can also turn your brain off and use. There's also the HE219, which is at rank 4, which once again, turn your brain off. There's a lot of turn your brain off things, where with the D13 you actually have to have your brain switched on, you have to understand positioning, you have to understand what's going on. So yeah, overall I would say it's definitely a relic of the past. It's never going to be as good as it once was, because other nations actually got what they should have had in the first place, and because of that, it's kind of left, in its own little hole. Still good. You still get the odd D13 pilot who's really, really good. The problem is you have to be really, really good, and you have to hone your craft. The Type 5 Ho-Ri pack. Now this is the Japanese, not Ho-Ri production, but Ho-Ri prototype. This machine here at 6.0. The reason why it is 6.0 compared to its compatriots is it has a hell of a lot less armor than it. And I also believe, does it have the same gun? Let's see. 105 Type 5. No, it has a different gun, so it'll have different ammo. Overall, it's just a smaller Ho-Ri production. The Ho-Ri production is a monster. The Ho-Ri prototype is a little bit less of a monster, but it's still pretty good. It's one of those machines where, because they added in the production, everybody knows where to shoot it. Bish, bash, bosh, bunk. You just shoot them either in here or in here, and what it does is takes out the gunner, takes out the loader, or takes out commander and loader. What you should do is really shoot it here. And they knackered its reverse gear. So, its max speed is not very fast going backwards. But if you want a fast tank destroyer with a decent amount of armor, play the Ho-Ri production. If you want something, something at 6.0, then you could run with the Bulldog. Oh, great. Yeah, let's go Bulldog and Ho-Ri prototype. But yeah, the Ho-Ri prototype's good, right? It's, it's got an average reload for a tank destroyer. If it pens, it pretty much one-shots everything because of the round that it has. This APHE has 200 grams of explosive mass, and that seems to just annihilate anything you touch. But overall, the problem with it is what you can stick it with. So you need it to be a true carry, and it's not a true carry. The Ho-Ri production, though, is because of its armor and its engine. The Centurion pack, the STRV. The STRV actually got a name change, the STRV-81, the RB52. What you can do is you can find it right here. The only difference between the Centurion Mark III and the STRV-81 is that this has 3 80 gems strapped to it. Some Robot 52 SS11s. Now these are keyboard controlled, and what that means is once you launch it, you have to, control it with your keyboard. This means that you can't move your tank, so obviously this is not the best for a lot of players, because you need to aim the rockets while also in the gunner view or outside of the gunner view, and you're not able to move your tank. So a lot of people will see this as a disadvantage unless you're firing over a hill. And obviously, as you can see with the trajectory of these rockets in the first place, they're supposed to be fired over a hill. And I'll show you why aiming them isn't exactly the easiest. So if we fire it up there, you can see it comes down, and as long as you twiddle it a little bit, you're able to use it. But let's say we want to hit this guy first. We have to wait till it comes into range, and then it ducks down, and then we kill a tree. So let's try again. Right, it ducks down, it has to come up. You can see I'm using the keyboard to control here, and I screwed it up. But yeah, you can see the idea here. It goes upwards, you keyboard control it down, and then you hit the targets. The main thing is, though, this is just a Centurion Mark III disguised as something that it isn't, and because of that, it has a higher BR. I personally would say that... Oh no, sorry, it has the same BR. I would personally would say that the STRV-81 is a very good premium, just because you can run it with the Carnarvon, you can run it with the Cent Mark III, and you can have a pretty good powerhouse. You got a stabilizer on the gun, you got okay, speed. It's not the best, but it's good enough. You have the STRV rockets, just in case you want to do something spicy, and you do have access to, some rounds, the Sabo round, which a lot of people don't like, but it's still okay. It just doesn't do a lot of pen damage, and if you want a lot of pen damage, well, you got the APC-BC. You got the HE for silly things, and then you got smoke grenades. Overall, if you played the Cent Mark III and you've enjoyed it, then pick this up. If you want a tank which is going to grind you up to rank 4 British, this is probably not what you're looking for. There isn't really that type of tank out there, to be quite honest, but it does have really good gun depression, has a really good reload rate, has a stabilizer on the gun. It has a lot of things going for us, but it ain't a carry, because it doesn't do enough damage. The next vehicle is George Bostwick's, P47M RE. You can find that. Let's see. There it is, 5.7. This thing has been slowly but surely up-tiered over time. It's because it's got a very powerful engine, has a lot of 50 cals on it, 8 of them, and it used to get an S-spawn. I'm not sure if it gets an S-spawn anymore, I'm pretty sure it doesn't, but what that means is it got taken away. So the P-47s have always been really good at intercepting bombers and getting above the enemy before they had a chance. Now you actually have to play it as a conventional fighter, and what that means is you actually have to fight mano a mano. At high altitude to mid to high altitude, P-47M is a monster, always will be, especially with its 850 cals, but when you get it dragged low, or when you start, trying to maneuver at low speeds, that's when the P-47 is pretty awful. So, staying at high speeds, staying at high altitude, letting the enemy come to you, you will batter them in this machine. It's a very, very good machine for that. On top of it, for ground realistic, has a lot of bomb loads, has a lot of different bomb loads. They're all really good, and it's a great plane to either take into air realistic, ground realistic, or enduring confrontation. It's one of those ones that can go anywhere. A lot of ammunition as well on the 50 cals. This pretty much means that with the APIT rounds, you can carry a game without ever having to go back to the airfield. The next vehicle is the Mustang. The Mustang P51D20. It's at 4.7, so it's a whole BR lower than the P47M. And the Mustang is a hit and miss. A lot of people don't like it, a lot of people do like it. I personally do like the Mustangs, and the reason is because in a squad they work really well together. If you have like 2, 3, or 4 of them together, it's very easy to pick apart the enemy. The problem a lot of people have is that it is or at least it used to feel like a very heavy aircraft. Getting up to altitude was not always the easiest, and on top of this, you had issues with the fact that a lot of stuff is very much more maneuverable than you. But if you can once again get this thing to mid to high altitude, P-51D-20 will just school everything. The only thing it may struggle with is Focke-Wulf D-13s. And if you're in a max up tier, 5-7, and you're facing stuff like that, then the best thing you can do is try and play a supportive role. Overall, the 650s with the 2,000 rounds, easily enough to carry a game, has a beautiful cockpit, beautiful design. The only problem is that once again, it needs that time to get up to speed and altitude, and sometimes American teams will just not let you do that, and they'll play the Germans' game and go in to get battered. So yeah, you got to watch out for that. Wyvern pack. So the Wyvern, if you don't know what it is, it's a British rank 4 premium. You can pretty much just use it to grind through the whole of the British tree, and the reason for this is because of the ordnance that it gets. What you get out of the Wyvern is an attacker, which has a little bit of a preponderance to be a fighter. It's not the best, it's really not the best fighter at 5.0, but it's one of the best attackers, definitely. I mean, you basically got the AD series and then the Wyvern. That's about it. So you can see all the different secondary weapons this thing can bring. It can even bring a torpedo if you wanted to, but with that said, it is quite a heavy aircraft, so going at lower speeds is not exactly advisable. But what's good about it is it's good in air realistic, good in ground realistic, because it can bomb and rocket everything. And as I said, it's kind of a pseudo fighter on top of that. At 5.0, it's a great pickup, and if you either want to grind through the British tree and don't want to play the lower levels, even though there's some very, very iconic aircraft in them, I would definitely say pick this thing up. It is incredibly fast as well. There's been a lot of times in battles where we pretty much mopped up the enemy team, and there's one Wyvern left, and he's just gone like Superman and just disappeared. And it's very annoying to find them again. So that is something you do have to watch out for. The speed of it in a straight line is great, but once you deviate from that line, yeah, you're going to lose a hell of a lot of speed. The next thing on the list is the AMX-30 pack. Now, the AMX-30 Premium is the exact same as the one that you see in the tech tree. It's right here. The AMX-30 1972. It has a coaxial 20 as a stock, and then it has the 7.62 on the top. The AMX-30, instead of that 20, which is incredibly good on the vehicle, it has a 12.7 millimeter. So right here. A lot of people used to say that this was a really bad premium, and I think they were correct when it first came out, but nowadays at 7.3 I actually think it's quite good, and the reason for this is because of the heat shell. They changed the heat shell properties a while back, maybe an update or two ago, where once it pens, it just absolutely donks the machine. So if you pen with this thing, which is quite easy to do, since you have 400 millimeters of penetration, you're going to do a hell of a lot of damage. I believe they made it so heat does the same as heat FS, or heat does the same as HE. I can't exactly remember. But as a backup tank to your AMX-30 1972, it's pretty good. At 7.3, then you can run the AMX-50 or the AMX-30 90 or the AMX-50 Foch if you feel like it, if you want to put in another powerhouse. But the only problem is it is a worse version of the one that you have in the tree. So for me, that's good. That's how premium should be. But for the average person, you may want something which is a little bit better. So just understand that. It's a worse version of what you have in the tree. The next vehicle is the T-29. T-29, an American powerhouse. 6.7, filling a BR, which is kind of overcrowded right now, and this is one of the biggest players in that BR. T-29 has great frontal armor for its BR. It has a 105mm, which in general can pen pretty much everything with its AP, and then if you want to be adventurous, you can use the one with the HE filler. Only pens 220, but if you hit something, it's going to die. The reload as well, 16.3 seconds, may seem like quite high, but for the size of gun and the amount of damage you do with it, it ain't too bad. You also have 3 50 cals on it, so anything which has you know, not a lot of armor, RU-251s, you know, objects, BMPs, you know, anything that you can run into. You can just machine gun it to death, you know, 50 callets. The engine is powerful enough to get this thing moving around the battlefield at a decent rate. It does struggle with hills and does have a pretty decent weak spot. So the weak spot is here. If you shoot here, you will detonate the ammo, and because of this, a lot of T-29 drivers don't really take a lot of ammo, but there still should be some in the bottom there. If you have better pen, then you just pen the turrets, and you pen it in a position where you hit the gunner and the loader on this side, so you can pen it right here, pen it right here, pen it right here, and just go straight through. Kill those two guys and you'll be in business, or just breach the thing and run at it, which is generally the way to, you know, deal with these big heavy tanks. Overall, it's one of the best tanks at 6.7. I personally prefer the T-34, just because it has the extra armor, and just because it has the bigger gun with the more penetration. And when I say T-34, I mean this machine here. Its brother, which was added after after the T-29. But yeah, it's a really good machine. It competes with everything at 6.7. The up tier isn't as brutal as it is for certain other vehicles. Your armor becomes kind of useless, but your gun is still useful, which is something that you want. But the only problem is it doesn't have artillery because it's a heavy tank, so that's kind of annoying. Everything else about it is great, though. The next one is the Magak. Now, I've done a video on the Magak. Where is the Magak? The Magak! So, I did a video on the Magak, and this was before it had added ERA. And as you can see on this picture, it actually doesn't have it doesn't have the ERA on it, because I don't have the vehicle. But everything else is here, and this is because I owned it before, but I didn't own it back then. So, yeah. You have the Sabo, Hesh, Heat FS, and Smoke. It's the typical 105mm experience from the US. I personally enjoy it as a, what would be the word? I enjoy it as a support tank. Now, a lot of people don't want to be a support tank, but I'm okay with being the second in line, as long as I can trade, you know, with an enemy. So what generally happens is you pick a partner, whoever it is on the battlefield, you follow him around, and whenever he gets shot, you make sure to counterfire, or if he is ever shooting at something, you make sure you are the secondary gun. The Magak cannot take a hit. It's heat. Because it has ERA over it, sometimes heat will bounce off of it, but most of the time, because it's a 7.7, you're facing stuff like Leopard 1s, the Heat FS will hit your ERA, and then it'll knock out your barrel anyway, or it'll knock out your breech. So overall, not the best. The maneuverability of the Magak is okay at 7.7, still not as good as, once again, the Leopard, and the STB, which are the two pretty much dominant forces at this BR. But as I said, if you let them come to you, then you're completely fine. The problem is, a lot of people want to be aggressive in this game, and because of that, the Magak 3 does not fit that playstyle. The next vehicle is the IS-6. Oh dear, the IS-6. The IS-6, when it came out, was a terror among men. And it was just annihilating everything. And it had two basic issues. The fact its BR was too low, and the fact that it had a bug added armor in the model itself. Now, at 7.3, it is definitely not as good as it once was, but it still is competent. It follows the same lineage as the IS-3, IS-4M, and now IS-7 that we have in the game, and the T-10, of being a fast, heavy tank with decent armor. And because of that, you can run around the battlefield like a lemming, and when somebody shoots you, if they don't kill you, you'll be able to shoot back with a big-ass gun. Welcome to the Soviet doctrine. It's 122mm, and it has access to two shells, penning 200 and 207mm respectively, but once they pen, they do a lot of damage. The reload rate is not good on the IS-6, but it does have a 12.7mm Dishka on the top, and also a coaxial. But mainly, the IS-6, if you play at your BR or you get down tiered, you can run around like a hillbilly and just annihilate everything. If you get up tiered, you have to play a little bit more conservatively, but understand that your gun is still good enough to, you know, be able to pen most things. You're just going to have to aim it instead of just point and click. Overall, it's your standard heavy tank that you see in War Thunder, where it's good at its tier, it's great in the down tier, and in the up tier you're thinking, well, there's probably some better options here. And yeah, that's basically how I see it. At 7.7, there are some crazy options for the Soviets. The Tiger II SLAR. Ah, the bane. Another bane of my existence. The Tiger II SLAR was added in before a lot of the counters that we have nowadays. And it is a machine which is very similar to the Tiger II-H. The only difference is that it has a slightly different engine, and it has this added-on armor on the side. So you know it's a SLAR by the added-on armor, but generally the way you approach it should be exactly the same. The reason why this used to be the bane of my existence is because of this bit here. And the reason why is because being where I am in the world, I don't have the best ping. So when people would shake their guns, I would shoot at this spot, and the gun would always get in the way, even though on my screen it wasn't anywhere near. So what you would end up with is a lot of non-penetrations on these flat parts, meaning that, you know, the gunner and the commander didn't die. This still happens to this day, and it is incredibly annoying. Luckily, I have more machines that I can just shoot the upper glacis of the Tiger II and it dies. But yeah, if you're looking for a grinder, the Tiger II-H SLAR is good. Also at 6.7, there is a lot of competition for it in the German tech tree. You know, you have the Tiger II-H, Flak Panzer 341, you got the 2 tank destroyers, you could throw in the Tiger II-P, but if you want to round out a new lineup with the new SP system, you know, with a Tiger II-H, a Tiger II-H SLAR, and a Flak Panzer, that could work pretty well. It has a very good gun on it as well. It has a medium tank reload instead of a heavy tank reload, and overall, it is a good vehicle at 6.7. You just gotta be careful if you get up-tiered once again, since it's a heavy, and it follows the heavy rules. The last machine is the Object 120. The Object 120 is a rank 5 7.7 premium that the Soviets have, and it is, well, it's probably one of the, it's a yin and yang, okay? So, chassis is very light, turret is very light, gun is very big. What you have here is either a recipe for success or a recipe for disaster. And what I mean by that is it's completely playstyle dependent. You have a very light vehicle, very fast, with a big gun. Now, a lot of people may think, well, this should be an aggressive tank, right? You know, you go in, get to a position quickly, use your gun. No, that's wrong. It's a tank which you have to play defensively, use it to support your allies, because, first of all, you don't have the gun depression, you don't have the gun stability, and also you don't have the reload. A lot of tanks which go in there very quickly, they have much better reloads than this, especially at 7.7, or at least not much better, but slightly better. And they have better gun depression, they have better gun stabilization. So what you have out of the 120 is a machine which has the ability to get to a sniping spot very quickly and use that to its advantage. So the gun itself, it fires heat FS, it's 152mm by the way, fires heat FS nearly 500mm a pen and 400mm on the APF SDS. This gun is a LOL cannon, and what I mean by that is you can just shoot it at anything at its BR or around its BR, and it will be able to pen. It's as simple as that. It is designed to just put holes in things. And even though it doesn't have a lot of armor, so it is subject to hull breaks, so you got to make sure that you don't get in the engine or the transmission. But if you use this as a peeker, what I mean by that is you sit near a corner or you sit near a hill, peek out, shoot, peek back down, peek out, shoot. You know, keep doing that. Make sure that nobody sees you. Same with the corner. You'll do crazy well with this tank, and then push forward with your allies when they're pushing. It's a really good tank to run with something like an IS-7. It can also get up-tiered pretty well, because it's got good penetration on the gun, and it is an arse to fight a lot of the time, just because it has such good muzzle velocity. You know, 1,000 on its heat FS and 1,700 on the APF SDS, and because it's fast, it can get to positions that you're not used to. If you don't get the first shot, it's gonna nail you. It's just an annoying as hell vehicle to face. But if you're playing it, as I said, it's got a very strict playstyle, and if you don't keep to it, you won't do very well in it. But if you do keep to it, you'll do great. You know, the getting to a position quickly, holding down the position, supporting the tanks as they're going in. Use it as an actual tank destroyer instead of as an aggressive tank, and you'll do well. But yeah, that is covering every single vehicle that is on offer on the Gaijin Store. I'm sorry that the video has been quite long, but there's a hell of a lot to get through. Anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.